Hi there. My name is David Batsoffen, and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. And I am in conversation with a global speaker who last year spent more than 180 bed nights in hotels in and around the world in order for him to ply his trade. Well, currently in 2020, I don't think there are that many bed nights. I think the hotels are missing the other Michael Jackson. Michael, how are you doing?
David, I'm well, thank you. And it's good to be with you on Travel and Things, an unmissable podcast. So I'm indeed honored, and I really appreciate being a guest with you on the podcast itself. I think you're right. You know, there's this aspect of staying in hotels. I've probably done 20 to 25 hotel nights this year before the lockdown freeze happened. And it's a hell of a change. I mean, I'm coming to you now live as it is out of my dining room, a room that I'd used, having lived in my house for 10 years, a room that I'd used twice before. It's a weird thing being home. My wife says she's begun to recognize me, and I know for a fact that the dogs have, because they've stopped barking when I come down the staircase. So it's extraordinary, really. But, you know, I've talked about change all of my life, and, you know, you and I and everyone watching this right now are experiencing that. And I've also been known for saying for some time that change will come faster to the people today than it ever has to any previous generation. And I guess the corona problem is exactly an indication of that. And expect more weird, strange, unusual things to happen that will affect and change our lives even greater into the future as well.
You sort of look at your travel plans via hotel nights. I look at them via kilometers. And if I look at my Google stats for April and May, they were 16 and 25 kilometers respectively, instead of the usual 3,500 that I'd been putting in most of last year. It's quite amazing. I describe myself as a non-traveling travel writer at the moment. And
Which is extraordinary, yeah.
It is. And also a question that I need to ask you, because everybody that I've spoken to, Michael, that works from home finds that they're working more than they did previously. You come into your office in the morning. I know, for instance, I'm in my office by 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I often don't leave here until mid-afternoon.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, David, that we're actually working both harder and smarter, you know, in many respects. And you've got to understand this in business terms. I think an awful lot of business executives don't trust their people to be able to work remotely or work from home, as it's now being called. And yet, you know, people love it. They got used to it after a period of change. They're finding that the commute isn't time burnt and wasted. They're saving an awful lot of, as you mentioned, on fuel and kilometers used in their cars. I mean, I used to drive between home and the airport from my place of residence to fly off to do my events. I've put 1 tank of fuel in my car in 3 months, which is extraordinary. I'm sure you've done the same. But people are concerned from a business perspective. The average company director is 63 years old. They're closer to World War II than they are 2040. So you've got to understand how people think about this in positions of power. It's a lot better for people to actually work remotely in this kind of instance. And we're working harder. You know, you're getting up earlier, finishing later. We're all doing much the same thing. But I was on a conference call the other day with 12,500 event planners talking about when the industry will resume in real live terms. And it may be a while yet. But what they were saying was that, you know, their conferences on webinars are actually now taking place predominantly Tuesday to Thursday between 9 and 3, because they think that those are the hours that people are working. It's almost as if Mondays are a write-off, because a throwback to the old office said, well, nobody worked on a Monday anyway, because they just spent the day talking about what they'd done at the weekend. And conversely, on a Friday, nobody worked on a Friday because they were planning what they were going to do for the next weekend. And now they said between 9 and 3, you know, assuming that we're all dressed and raring to go from our dining room tables, our bedrooms, our patios, or wherever it is that we're privileged to broadcast from. Of course, that's not true. We're working probably 6 days a week, maybe stretching a day off. Have you also noticed, David, like myself, that I never knew in the past whether it was a Saturday, a Monday, or a Wednesday, because conferences happen 7 days a week. But even more so now, I have no idea. I've got to check my Outlook calendar to actually wake up and realize what day it is.
Well,
Are you finding the same?
I am. I have medication that I take on a daily basis, and it lives on my in my bathroom in a little container, which goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's the only way that I know that I'm actually taking the medication, or that what day of the week it is, because I'm taking my medication correctly. But what I've tried to do, Michael, is I've tried not to work on a weekend. So because I want a weekend, yet I found that I find work for myself. I think, oh, hang on a second, I've got an article that needs to be written. Maybe I can do the prep work on Saturday or Sunday. Then on Monday, I can just tweak it, and I'm maybe a day or so ahead of my deadline. But you're quite right. At the end of the day, I don't think any of us have any idea what day of the week it actually is. It now looks like Michael's gone to sleep, but I know that it's only a frozen moment in time, and he will return to us momentarily. And there he is. You're back,
Hopefully
Michael.
I'm back live. There we are. Yes.
You see, that's
this
how
is
it
also
works.
the problem, I guess, with it's also the problem, I guess, with a little bit of technology. We're all learning it, getting into it. It's a little bit unstable. Our bandwidth in South Africa is not the best that it ought to be. But look, there are people like yourself and myself who are taking good advantage of this kind of thing as well. I think in lockdown terms, one of the most extraordinary examples I saw was very quickly Tintswalo Safari Lodge up in the Manuletti. And they're a great group of hotels and lodges. But they realized that their game ranges were on lockdown. They still had animals, they still had a game reserve, and they still had vehicles. They just didn't have guests. So what they did was thought very cleverly about how they could survive this period. Obviously they need revenue, but they could turn their attention to marketing. And so what they're doing every single day, including weekends, is going out and filming a game drive in the afternoons and the evenings, editing it overnight, and in the morning bringing you a 10-minute coffee break or pause break, if you will, from your hectic day of being online with technology. Some of their game viewing experiences that they've captured on video have been sensational. And I think that, on Facebook, where they marketed this originally, they were lucky enough to take 100,000 downloads of their very first day of game viewing virtually. Now, at one level, it's a great example of change, I think, because at one level, how would an organization like Tintswalo buy 100,000 viewers? They're not renowned for having huge budgets. And I was talking about this on a conference with a client the other day, actually, and they were saying, yeah, but, they only got 100,000 views. I mean, how are they going to capitalize on that? And I know that from the people that were talking to them online, using the chat box, getting involved in dialogue, that they've got themselves a brand new audience that had never seen them before, who will consider them, by the way, for when things come back, and will remember them well for it.
Michael, you mentioned World War II. Back in the day, Heinz, the tomato sauce manufacturer, when World War II happened and all the major companies closed down their marketing divisions because of the war effort, and they were, looking to support the Americans and that type of thing, Heinz said, no, we are going to pump money into marketing. They increased their revenues by a third in those war years. And when asked why they did it, the then CEO of Heinz said, because one day the war will end, and the only tomato sauce that will be remembered is Heinz. And to this very day, Heinz is still one of the top brands in America. And it's for that very reason, Michael, that I believe that when I phone clients and they go, oh, I don't know, we haven't got money for budget at the moment, I go, whatever it is, spend it wisely so that people remember you when lockdown is finished, because those that are out there will be remembered. The others will fall by the wayside.
Which is why I'm delighted that you're continuing with your podcast series of travel and things and all the other activity that you're doing, David, because I think that the advertising of the past, as it used to be, is going to be replaced more after lockdown by marketing. And in fact, that's already kicked off to a large extent now. Marketing is the art of telling a story. And those who are the best storytellers right now will reach an empathetic situation with the audiences that are out there and will hook them together. And stories will become the new ultimate form of advertising for 2021
Yeah.
and beyond. You know, people have always learned, we've grown up telling each other stories, fairy tales to urban legends. You know, we were told stories by our parents growing up. We tell each other stories every single day. I've just told you the story of Tint Swallow now, for example. And I think that he who owns the storytelling and creates the best storytelling into the future will win hands down. And now is the perfect time to be sitting literally through lockdown, working out what your story is. There's a code for getting it, by the way.
There is.
Understand your people. Understand the market that you're talking to.
That's exactly
and give
it.
them what they want.
If you look at somebody like Nando's, that have always used storytelling in their advertising, and that's why people remember them. And also, they've got some really good marketing people in Britain specifically. You turn on any talk show in England at the moment, from Graham Norton up or down, and at least Nando's will be mentioned at least once. I don't know who Robbie Brosen is paying, but it's working really well.
It's extraordinary. And Robbie actually had a really good example of storytelling as well that wasn't an advert. Just as they went into lockdown, as we all did, he produced a video as the CEO talking to his Nandockers, the people who work inside Nando's. And he told them a story of why they were turning the flame off temporarily, but that the organization would be looking after them. They'd be keeping everything ticking over, ready for when they turned the flame back on and customers were coming back. Now, you can go onto YouTube today and just search for Nando's lockdown. It's not an advert. People have seen it and compare it to a Nando's advert because it's so brilliant. But it was the perfect example of storytelling, where a CEO had the right level of leadership and talked to his organization by creating their own unique story and putting it across appropriately. People couldn't help but share it. The Nando's Lockdown CEO message on YouTube is one of the most amazing things I've had the privilege of seeing. I wish we'd written it because it's so bloody clever.
Behind you, Michael, is your poster that says change. And prior to lockdown, what was your version of change, or what was the version of change that you espoused when you went to do your talks internationally?
Basically, you know, from a business to business or business to consumer aspect, I was trying to get people to understand that change happens at a constant level. The pace of it, as mentioned earlier, is incredibly fast, faster now than ever before. And that the way things were will not be the way things are into the future. And in many respects, it was trying to encourage people to think about what they could do to modify their own business approach, to understand that the world of the future had a place for them if they brought themselves into it correctly. Empathy, understanding, learning from people, looking for opportunities and ideas that come from a literal understanding of your marketplace, living ethically, responsibly, morally, all of those things. And that's been a big issue over the last couple of weeks with what's gone on with the Black Lives Matter campaign, and leaving behind the things that people normally start with: negativity, doubt, and routine. You know, we always tend to be negative as humans. Our brains want us to be careful before we do anything different. So your brain creates this whole mind map for you that says, test it all first. Stick to what you know. Stick to the tried and tested. You know what the safest way of doing things are. You know, if you were, for example, to try and drive to your office as a regular destination, you leave home at the same time, drive the same way on the same mode of transport every single day. And if you try and tell your brain to do it differently, to turn left instead of right and leave at a different time, your brain's going to tell you, hang on, how long have you lived here? You know the best way and the best time to get to work. You know, why would you change it now? You're a smart individual. But if you put the window down in the vehicle in which you're traveling, that noise is coming from the inside in, not from the outside in.
Yeah.
And so we resist change as humans. And many people right now have struggled with lockdown, for example. You know, it was unusual. It still is unusual to a large extent. But from the initial concern about it, more people are beginning to enjoy it now. Their leaders aren't. Most company organizations want their people back in so they can be watched, so they can be overseen, kind of in a Dickensian way that the overseer looks down upon you doing your ledger inscriptions. But the fact of the matter is, as you've said, we're all working harder, we're working smarter, we're not wasting 4 hours a day stuck in traffic, burning fuel and wasting time. You know, we always moaned about traffic without realizing that we were the bloody traffic.
Well, this is it. And I thought when the lockdown happened, you know, I'd be able to write that book. I'd be able to finish the course that I always wanted to. I'd be able to read voraciously. And I haven't done any of those because, luckily, I have been busy. And it's not that I'm making work for myself.
I think we get to that stage of being incredibly busy as a result of ourselves, just engaging in what it is that we know and do.
And I haven't.
What's been intriguing for me as well, thinking of, you know, the platform of travel and things right now, is. Sorry, go ahead.
No. That's what happens with the lag. So finish your thought. I'd finished mine, so it's okay. You were talking about the travel and things platform.
I beg your pardon. You know, when you look at travel organizations, we've mentioned the one that's done incredibly well, Tinswallow. There have been very few travel organizations that have actually put their marketplace together from this virtual platform and reassured me. I mean, one of them that did was Qatar Airways. I fly religiously with Qatar. I find them to be an incredible airline, although their prices have gone up quite dramatically before lockdown, which shocked me a little. But, you know, they were saying, they sent me a mailer saying, listen, we know that travel's a problem right now. So any tickets that you've got in our system, and I did have tickets, I was due to fly Chicago, Miami, all over the place. You can either have a full refund, no questions asked, or you can delay them for a year without any penalty whatsoever and fly when again, you know, you want to fly at that level. My concern though, wasn't the tickets. My concern was my frequent flyer status, because I need lounge access. I need to be able to change things at the flick of a switch. And they sent me another mail saying, listen, don't worry, your frequent flyer status is not going to be changed. We're suspending all of our regular terms. It will stay at the level that you're at into the future until we can all start flying again. So they were understanding what their people were worried about. You know, if I look at someone like a British Airways or dare I say, a South African Airways, I mean, did you get anything that was empathetic from them? So some people have got their stories right, Dave, and a lot of people haven't. I think hotels are lacking in this as well, by the way.
I believe, Michael, that at the end of the day, and I think we alluded to it a little earlier, that those that A, understand their marketplace, and B, keep in contact regularly and religiously, will be the ones to survive. Because, as you say, Qatar Air is for you, has come back to you, has addressed your fears and concerns. Yet another airline might not have. So why should you fly with anybody else, despite the increase in fares? Because you know that they care about you. And this is the thing, I think, the biggest sort of 1984 of all, is that we're going to have to come to terms with all of this. The crossing of provincial borders. At the moment, if you want to travel, if you want to go from Johannesburg to Hartbeespoort Dam, currently, you can't without a permit, because Hartbeespoort Dam is in northwest.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
But you can go to Magaliesburg, because Magaliesburg is in Gauteng.
Those situations for me are changing temporarily. They will go back to. Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. There will be some level of normality that returns into the future. But let's understand that things will not be as they were before. We're going to have to do a whole bunch of very different things. My own industry in eventing is going to have to, if it wants a live audience, it's going to have social distancing, at least until a vaccine comes out for something like coronavirus.
Right.
We're going to have to be very aware of large gatherings. You know, look at some restaurants that have opened up in Amsterdam where they built bubbles for their people. We're seeing spit screens, as they're called now, operating between humans and humans. Now, all of these are immediate short-term reactions to the situation that's developed because of the strange virus. But we're going to have to figure out better solutions. And all of us are going to have to work out where our own place and story is into a very different future, because it's never going to be the same as it was before.
Michael,
no one ever goes back to the old forms of history. You know, do you want to go back to old black and white photography?
No. or film. But having said that, Michael, having said that, he says reaching in, look what I still have. I still have a roll of film, which I haven't shot yet. Old film, old analog
It's gone
film.
stale by now, David. It's gone forever.
No. This is from last year. This is still very fresh, Michael. This is not old stock. This is just stock I haven't used. I still have an analog camera that I can use. But that being said, I believe, because I seem to remember you showing me a slide at some particular point, that a quote
it's extraordinary
of Lennon's,
that you've got it.
What, my camera?
No, your old film like that, really. I mean, think about it now. It's got to be bits and bytes into the future rather than films. And, you know, you can't still be negative about that. You've got to develop yourself, David, and move on a little.
Don't give up your day job, Michael.
I'm working hard here. I'm working hard here.
but what did Rodney Dangerfield say? Ain't get no respect.
Ain't got no respect. You know, it's a funny thing.
But
Thinking
no,
of quotes. Go on.
I was going to ask you about, I know that in your talks, you use a quote from Lennon, which seems as relevant now as it did when he said it.
Yeah, Vladimir Lenin, often not mentioned in business talks around the world, has come out with something quite remarkable now in terms of, he said 100 years ago, there are decades when nothing happens. And then there are weeks when decades happen. Wow. We've seen that recently, haven't we, in the lockdown scenario. And I think that, David, you know, what we've got to realize from it is that everything has changed instantly. The normal response to that was surprise, denial, disbelief, uncertainty, fear, a little bit of anger. You know, the rules have changed. And what happened was governments froze. We all froze. It was kind of information overload in many individual respects. And lockdown, which 2 billion humans, by the way, are in some form of lockdown right now. You know, it disrupted everything. It kind of irritated, it angered people. You can see that, you can feel it on social media platforms. And what's intriguing for me is that science tended to prevail. Governments were out of their depths. They called in the scientists. And yet, you know, business leadership in many respects disappeared in favor of the scientist kind of scenario. And the extraordinary thing for me about scientists is there are only 2 types of scientists. There are those who don't know, and then there are those who don't know that they don't know. And it said you get, what is it? Lies, damned lies, and statistics. I mean, it's extraordinary for me. It's been proven, allegedly, that you can give a dart to a chimpanzee and ask it to hit the bullseye on a dartboard. And the chimpanzee has as much statistical chance of achieving it as any so-called expert getting it right. So, you know, I mean, what's being predicted for us? Lots of disaster. Do we know that it's disaster yet? I don't think so.
My best at the moment is, you know, that Elon Musk's Dragon X took off, was spectacular. Yes. The launch was fantastic. The images coming back from that capsule are, you know, beyond quality of what we've seen before. And now they're there for somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And something that I popped up on Facebook the other day said that because they're there for such a long while, we can all go out, hire chimpanzee suits, and learn to ride horses before they get back.
Exactly. Planet of the Apes coming to life. I think it's brilliant. You know, it was extraordinary. I saw something as well on Facebook. The old Apollo 11 capsule that Aldrin and Armstrong stared at.
Yeah.
And then the space shuttle flight captains that had to look at their screens. And then the astronauts that were driving, in fact, they weren't even driving, if truth be known, the spacecraft heading up to the space station. And the difference in technology was quite remarkable. And that's 50 years.
Yeah. Dragon X had 4 TV screens, that's all.
That's it. Unbelievable. Yeah. And you know what, when you think about it, the Jumbo Jet 747 was built in the same era as the Apollo missions.
Yeah.
50 to 60 years ago, right? Sure, they've upgraded the technology and they've done what they can with them. But my goodness, I mean, travel is changing dramatically. How's this for a stat? There is no city on Earth that cannot be reached from any other city on Earth within 24 hours today. And that means that the planet has changed forever. That's extraordinary when you think about it.
It is when you think that in the good old days you had to go via and long layovers, and now if you time it correctly, you can bounce in and out of places, and as you say, get to your destinations in under 24 hours. Your luggage arriving in 24 hours, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah,
Michael.
not so sure. Not so sure.
Not so sure.
It's also quite interesting for me in that context, because as you know, my secret passion when I'm away from business and conferencing is getting up to Barberton in Mpumalanga and getting into the old gold mining subject up there. I collect avidly books, pamphlets, ephemera, photographs on all of that era from the early 1890s. And there was a book that came out by Edward Peter Mathers called A Trip to the Goldfields. And in it, there was an advertisement for Union Castle Shipping Lines, I think it was, saying now the new goldfields of South Africa, only 38 days from London.
Yeah.
Wow, only 38
and
days,
now we're looking at what?
Remarkable.
12 hours?
Oh, you can get from London to Barberton in under 24 hours.
Yeah.
Any city, even, I mean, Barberton's not quite a city, it's more of a town, but you could still make it within 24 hours. Yes, certainly.
You segued very nicely into this, because I was about to take you to Barberton, because I know that a couple of years ago, as a birthday present, you got a magic wand. You got
metal detector.
You got a metal detector. I was so envious of you. And what have you found with your metal detector, Michael?
We found some extraordinary stuff, and I've found kilograms of stuff, mainly old tin roof. That's what weighs me down. We found artifacts there. I mean, I cannot believe how the old travelers of yesteryear were so horrendously lackluster with their cleaning up of their materials and their stuff. Obviously, there was no refuse collections and what have you. So we found old bottles, we found old tins, bullet casings literally litter those mountains up in the Makonjwa. And I mean, it's one of the most exciting parts of South Africa's development for me. Thousands of gold miners descended on, before, around that Pilgrim's Rest period, descended on the Moody's Valley and found the richest gold mine in the world. They left behind, like mountaineers did on Everest, all of the detritus. I mean, it's amazing how much crap you can actually pick up. We find the odd coin, though, the odd little interesting button or the odd little thing. The key to metal detecting for anyone who's keen on doing it is, if you're swinging the detector, always have a keen digger with you. And I've gone through, I award badges, David. I give them a bronze, a silver, and a gold. Very few people make it to the gold digger badge status. Most of them give up at bronze, quite frankly, because it's bloody hard work digging up the odd beep here, there, and everywhere. My son-in-law, Cameron, however, is heading towards his gold badge. He's got fever. You could give him steel cap boots and hit that signal with him of his own shoes, and he'd dig you right through the planet if he could. He's just waiting to turn up that treasure. And the Kruger millions are out there somewhere, let me tell you. Extraordinary.
You think?
Oh, yeah. I'm convinced of it. Convinced of it. I can't tell you more, though. I'd have to kill you, and that would end travel and things, so we don't want to do that.
Michael, when you're able to go back and travel internationally, if money was no object, what am I looking for here? The topic was no object. Is there a venue that you, as Michael Jackson, would want to play or would want to speak in?
It's been, I'm going to try and answer that slightly differently, if I may, because I've been privileged to go to an awful lot of places around the world. And I've used that time, because normally I fly in, work, have a quick look around, and then get the hell out. But I've used that time to find places that I want to go back to with my wife. There are three of them in particular. One of them, Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City.
Yep.
just extraordinary in terms of history, culture, food, vibe. The ability to, you know, to get a great holiday for very little money is also quite important. And I think Vietnam will still be a great place to go. The second one is Latvia, of all places.
Okay.
I did a conference in Riga.
Mm.
Riga is home, surrounded by an immense number of old castles. And they're so old, and they haven't yet been fully restored, that there's no electricity in them. So in many cases, you get a miner's lamp and go and swing it as you walk through these old castles and dungeons and turrets and what have you. And that I just absolutely love. And then last year, and thank goodness I did it, because I'd never seen the band play live. I had a gig in Milano, and the week after, we stayed on. My wife and I came over. My wife came over to join me, and we stayed on for a week. I managed to get tickets to see Kiss, the rock band, perform live in Milan. But then we took a couple of days to drive around that region outside of Milan, and we found a place called Castello d'Aquila, which is an old 11th century castle on top of a hill overlooking some of these tiny little Italian villages from its pinnacle up top. We stayed in a turret to ourselves, fully refurbished. The woman that owns it spent 14 million euros, all of her life savings. She's been sued by her kids for the money that she spent restoring this castle into its immediate beauty and brilliance. And she'll never make her money back. I know that for a fact. It was 120 euros a night to stay in that hotel for my wife and I, bed and breakfast. The best value I've ever had. I mean, oh my goodness, it was just remarkable. So yeah, those three places, Latvia, Vietnam, and certainly the northern part of Italy once again.
When we were in Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon, depending on who you talk to, about 5 years ago, and I was shown a T-shirt in a marketplace, and I didn't buy it stupidly because the T-shirt said Vietnam, a country and not a war. And we then went up north, and I never found that T-shirt again. The vendor had said to me, "You're only going to find it here, so you may as well buy it from me." And I didn't, stupidly. It's one of those things I've subsequently learned. If you find something you like, buy it immediately. Even if it is the wrong size, you can just hang it up in and use it as decoration in an office. Michael, I'm going to end on that. I look forward to you and I having a breakfast at that particular place in Four Ways that you like so much.
Humble Harry's.
Humble Harry's, because we haven't been there for a while, and hopefully one day that will be an option once again. I
so look forward to that, David. Thank you.
I've been in conversation with global speaker Michael Jackson. Michael, once again, thank you for being my guest this afternoon.
Namaste. A real privilege. Thank you.